Academic freedom is the conviction that the freedom of inquiry by faculty members is essential to the mission of the Academy as well as the principles of academia, and that scholars should have freedom to teach or communicate ideas or facts without being targeted for repression, job loss, or imprisonment. Academic freedom is a contested issue and therefore has limitations in practice. In the United States, for example, according to the widely recognized 1940 Statement on Academic Freedom and Tenure of the American Association of University Professors, teachers should be careful to avoid controversial matter that is unrelated to the subject. When they speak or write in public, they are free to express their opinions without fear from institutional censorship or discipline, but they should show restraint and clearly indicate that they are not speaking for their institution. Academic tenure protects academic freedom by ensuring that teachers can be fired only for causes such as gross professional incompetence behavior that evokes condemnation from the academic community itself. Historical background. Although the notion of academic freedom has a long implicit history, the idea was first clearly formulated in response to the encroachments of the totalitarian state on science and academia in general for the furtherance of its own goals. For instance, in the Soviet Union, scientific research was brought under strict political control in the 1930s. A number of research areas were declared bourgeois pseudoscience and forbidden, notably genetics. The trend toward subjugating science to the interests of the state also had proponents in the West, including the influential Marxist John Desmond Bernal, who published The Social Function of Science in 1939. In contrast to this approach, Michael Polanyi argued that a structure of liberty is essential for the advancement of science, that the freedom to pursue science for its own sake is a prerequisite for the production of knowledge through peer review and the scientific method. In 1936, as a consequence of an invitation to give lectures for the Ministry of Heavy Industry in the USSR, Polanyi met Bukharin, who told him that in socialist societies all scientific research is directed to accord with the needs of the latest 5-year plan. Demands in Britain for centrally planned scientific research led Polanyi, together with John Baker, to found the influential Society for Freedom in Science. The society promoted a liberal conception of science as free inquiry against the instrumental view that science should exist primarily to serve the needs of society. In a series of articles republished in The Contempt of Freedom and the Logic of Liberty, Polanyi claimed that cooperation amongst scientists is analogous to the way in which agents coordinate themselves within a free market. Just as consumers in a free market determine the value of products, science is a spontaneous order that arises as a consequence of open debate amongst specialists. Science can therefore only flourish when scientists have the liberty to pursue truth as an end in itself. Scientists, freely making their own choice of problems and pursuing them in the light of their own personal judgment, are in fact cooperating as members of a closely knit organization. Such self-coordination of independent initiatives leads to a joint result which is unpremeditated by any of those who bring it about. Any attempt to organize the group under a single authority would eliminate their independent initiatives, and thus reduce the joint effectiveness to that of the single person directing them from the center. It would, in effect, paralyze a cooperation. Rationale. Proponents of academic freedom believe that the freedom of inquiry by students and faculty members is essential to the mission of the Academy. They argue that academic communities are repeatedly targeted for repression due to their ability to shape and control the flow of information. When scholars attempt to teach or communicate ideas or facts that are inconvenient to external political groups or to authorities, they may find themselves targeted for public vilification, job loss, imprisonment, or even death. For example, in North Africa, a professor of public health discovered that his country's infant mortality rate was higher than government figures indicated. He lost his job and was imprisoned. The fate of biology in the Soviet Union is also cited as a reason why society has an interest in protecting academic freedom. A Soviet biologist, Trofim Lysenko, rejected Western science, then focused primarily on making advances in theoretical genetics, based on research with the fruit fly, and proposed a more socially relevant approach to farming that was based on the collectivist principles of dialectical materialism. Lysenko's ideas proved appealing to the Soviet leadership, in part because of the value as propaganda, and he was ultimately made director of the Soviet Academy of Agricultural Sciences. Subsequently, Lysenko directed a purge of scientists who professed harmful ideas, resulting in the expulsion, imprisonment, or death of hundreds of Soviet scientists. Lysenko's ideas were then implemented on collectivized farms in the Soviet Union and China. Famines that resulted partly from Lysenko's influence believed to have killed 30 million people in China alone. AFAF of the United Kingdom as a campaign for lecturers, academic staff and researchers who want to make a public statement in favor of free inquiry and free expression. The statement of academic freedom has two main principles: that academics, both inside and outside the classroom, have unrestricted liberty to question and test received wisdom and to put forward controversial and unpopular opinions, whether or not these are deemed offensive, and that academic institutions have no right to curb the exercise of this freedom by members of the staff, or to use it as grounds for disciplinary action or dismissal. AFAF and those who agree with its principles believe that it is important for academics to be able not only to express their opinions, but also to put them to scrutiny and to open further debate. They are against the idea of telling the public Platonic, noble lies, and believe that people need not be protected from radical views. Academic freedom for academic staff. The concept of academic freedom as a right of faculty members is an established part of most legal systems, different from the United States, where academic freedom is derived from the guarantee of free speech under the First Amendment. Constitutions of other countries typically grant a separate right to free learning, teaching, and research. In France, professors at public French universities and researchers in public research laboratories are expected, as are all civil servants, to behave in a neutral manner and to not favor any particular political or religious point of view during the course of their duties. However, the academic freedom of university professors is a fundamental principle recognized by the laws of the Republic, as defined by the Constitutional Council. Furthermore, statute law declares about higher education that teachers, researchers and teachers are fully independent and enjoy full freedom of speech in the course of the research and teaching activities, provided they respect, following university traditions and the dispositions of this code, principles of tolerance and objectivity. The nomination and promotion of professors is largely done through process of peer review rather than through normal administrative procedures. In Germany, the German constitution specifically grants academic freedom. Art and science, research and teaching are free. Freedom of teaching does not absolve from loyalty to the Constitution. In a tradition reaching back to the 19th century, jurisdiction has understood this right as one to teach, study, and conduct research freely, although the last concept has sometimes been taken as a cover term for the first two. Lehrfreiheit embraces the right of professors to determine the content of the lectures and to publish the results of the research without prior approval, since professors through the habilitation receive the right to teach in a particular academic field. Academic freedom is deemed to cover at least the entirety of this field. Lernfreiheit means a student's right to determine an individual course of study. Finally, Freiheit der Wissenschaft permits academic self-governance and grants the university control of its internal affairs. Through the introduction of disciplinary curricula, Lernfreiheit has become a rather empty concept. In the Netherlands, the academic freedom is rather limited, as defined in the Statute on Higher Education and Scientific Research. This freedom only applies to certain institutions, with the Royal Netherlands Meteorological Institute as a notable exception. So for instance, even if they make scientifically solid statements about climate change, they are subject to political scrutiny, which means that the publications are scientifically questionable. In the Philippines, the 1987 Philippine Constitution states that academic freedom shall be enjoyed in all institutions of higher learning. Philippine jurisprudence and courts of law, including the Philippine Supreme Court, tend to reflexively defer to the institutional autonomy of higher institutions of learning in determining academic decisions with respect to the outcomes of individual cases filed in the courts regarding the abuse of academic freedom by professors, despite the individual merits or demerits of any cases. A closely watched case was the controversial case of University of the Philippines at Diliman sociology professor Sarah Raimundo, who was not granted tenure due to an appeal by the minority dissenting vote within the faculty of the sociology department. This decision was sustained upon appeal by the dissenting faculty and Professor Raimundo to the University of the Philippines at Diliman Chancellor Sergio Escao, and though the case was elevated to University of the Philippines System President Merlinda R. Roman denied the appeal, which was elevated by Professor Raimundo to the university's Board of Regents for decision, and the board granted her request for tenure. A major bone of contention among the supporters of Professor Raimundo was not to question the institutional academic freedom of the department in not granting her tenure, but in asking for transparency in how the academic freedom of the department was exercised, in keeping with traditions within the University of the Philippines in providing a basis that may be subject to peer review for academic decisions made under the mantle of academic freedom. In South Africa, Section 16 of the 1996 Constitution of South Africa offers specific protection to academic freedom. However, there have been a large number of scandals around the restriction of academic freedom at a number of universities, with particular concern being expressed at the situation at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. In New Zealand, academic freedom pertains to forms of expression by academic staff engaged in scholarship and is defined by the Education Act 1989 as a. The freedom of academic staff and students within the law to question and test received wisdom, to put forward new ideas and to state controversial or unpopular opinions. b. The freedom of academic staff and students to engage in research. c. The freedom of the university and its staff to regulate the subject matter of courses taught at the university. d. The freedom of the university and its staff to teach and assess students in the manner they consider best promotes learning. And e. The freedom of the university through its council and vice-chancellor to appoint its own staff. In the United States, academic freedom is generally taken as the notion of academic freedom defined by the 1940 Statement of Principles on Academic Freedom and Tenure. jointly authored by the American Association of University Professors and the Association of American Colleges. These principles state that teachers are entitled to freedom in the classroom in discussing the subject. The statement also permits institutions to impose limitations of academic freedom because of religious or other aims, so long as they are clearly stated in writing at the time of the appointment. The principles have only the character of private pronouncements, not that of binding law. The 6 regional accreditors work with American colleges and universities, including private and religious institutions, to implement this standard. Additionally, the AAUP, which is not an accrediting body, works with this same institutions. The AAUP does not always agree with the regional accrediting bodies on the standards of protection of academic freedom and tenure. The AAUP lists those colleges and universities which it has found to violate these principles. There is some case law in the United States that teachers are limited in their academic freedoms. Academic freedom for colleges and universities. A prominent feature of the English university concept is the freedom to appoint faculty, set standards and admit students. This ideal may be better described as institutional autonomy and is distinct from whatever freedom is granted to students and faculty by the institution. The Supreme Court of the United States said that academic freedom means a university can determine for itself on academic grounds who may teach, what may be taught, how it should be taught, and who may be admitted to study. In a 2008 case, a federal court in Virginia ruled that professors have no academic freedom. All academic freedom resides with the university or college. In that case, Stronach v. Virginia State University, a district court judge held that no constitutional right to academic freedom exists that would prohibit senior officials from changing a grade given by to one of his students. The court relied on mandatory precedent of the U.S. Supreme Court case of Sweezy v. New Hampshire and a case from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Stronach Court also relied on persuasive cases from several circuits of the Courts of Appeals, including the First, Third, and Seventh Circuits. That court distinguished the situation when a university attempts to coerce a professor into changing a grade, which is clearly in violation of the First Amendment, from when university officials may, in the discretionary authority, change the grade upon appeal by a student. The Stronach case has gotten significant attention in the academic community as an important precedent. Pontifical universities. Pontifical universities around the world, such as the Catholic University of America, the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, Angelicum in Rome, the Université Catholique de Leuven in Belgium, and the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru depend for the status as pontifical universities and for the terms of academic freedom on the Pope. Through the Congregation for Catholic Education, the terms of academic freedom at ecclesiastical institutions of education are outlined in the Apostolic Constitution Sapientia Christiana. Relationship to freedom of speech. Academic freedom and free speech rights are not coextensive. Although this widely accepted view has been recently challenged by an institutionalist perspective on the First Amendment, academic freedom involves more than speech rights. For example, it includes the right to determine what is taught in the classroom. The AAUP gives teachers a set of guidelines to follow when their ideas are considered threatening to religious, political, or social agendas. When teachers speak or write in public, whether via social media or in academic journals, They are able to articulate their own opinions without the fear from institutional restriction or punishment, but they are encouraged to show restraint and clearly specify that they are not speaking for their institution. In practice, academic freedom is protected by institutional rules and regulations, letters of appointment, faculty handbooks, collective bargaining agreements, and academic custom. In the U.S., the freedom of speech is guaranteed by the First Amendment, which states that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. By extension, the First Amendment applies to all governmental institutions, including public universities. The U.S. Supreme Court has consistently held that academic freedom is a First Amendment right at public institutions. However, the United States' First Amendment has generally been held to not apply to private institutions, including religious institutions. These private institutions may honor freedom of speech and academic freedom at the discretion